The envelope slid across the mahogany table with a sound that changed everything. Inside was a check for $500,000, and Victor Langford was smiling like he'd just solved all his problems with one signature. What he didn't know was that the man sitting across from him, the one he was trying to buy off like some gold-digging nobody, controlled 47% of his entire empire. My name is Julian Voss, and this is the story of how I watched my wife's family try to destroy me while I held their financial future in the palm of my hand. For 3 years, I'd been married to Leila Langford, the daughter of one of Chicago's most prominent real estate developers. And for 3 years, I'd let her family believe I was nothing more than a struggling data analyst who'd somehow convinced their precious daughter to marry beneath her station. The truth was far more complicated. The truth was that I owned enough shares in Langford Realty Corporation to remove Victor from his own boardroom with a single phone call. But I'd stayed silent, watching, waiting to see who these people really were when they thought no one was keeping score. The dinner invitation came on a Tuesday morning. Leila handed me her phone over breakfast, showing me a text from her mother, Beatrice. "Mom wants us over for dinner this Friday," Leila said, her voice tight with the kind of tension that had become normal whenever her family entered the conversation. "Just the 4 of us. She says it's important." I knew what important meant in the Langford family vocabulary. It meant Victor had decided it was time to address the embarrassment of his daughter's marriage to someone who drove a 7-year-old Honda and rented a modest apartment in a neighborhood his gardeners wouldn't visit. "Should be interesting," I said, keeping my voice neutral while I calculated exactly how interesting this dinner might become. Leila sat down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. "Julian, please don't take this the wrong way, but maybe we should cancel. When my parents get that formal, it usually means they're planning something." She wasn't wrong. In the 3 years we'd been married, Victor and Beatrice had made their disapproval crystal clear, through 1,000 small cuts. The way Beatrice would mention Leila's ex-boyfriend, Simon, who now ran his own investment firm. The way Victor would talk about successful young men in his industry, always making sure I understood I wasn't one of them. The carefully planned family gatherings where I'd be seated at the children's table, while Leila's cousins, all properly credentialed and appropriately wealthy, discussed business with the adults. "We're going," I said firmly. "I want to see what they're planning." What Leila didn't know, what nobody except my attorney and financial advisors knew, was that Julian Voss, the unremarkable data analyst, was also JV Holdings, the anonymous investment entity that had been steadily acquiring Langford Realty Corporation stock for the past 8 years. It started when I was 24, fresh out of MIT, with a degree in financial engineering and a small inheritance from my grandfather. Most people would have bought a nice car or taken an expensive vacation. I bought stock in a struggling real estate company run by a man named Victor Langford, who was drowning in debt from overambitious projects and poor timing during the 2008 crash. I'd studied Victor's company for months before making my first purchase. His fundamentals were solid, his properties were in the right locations, but his capital structure was a disaster. He needed money desperately, and his existing investors were losing faith. So I started buying quietly, through layers of corporate entities that couldn't be traced back to me. Within 3 years, I owned 15% of his company. By the time we met Leila at a charity auction 5 years ago, I owned 31%. By the time we got married, I owned 42%. Today, I owned 47%. Which made me the single largest shareholder in Langford Realty Corporation. Victor Langford worked for me. He just didn't know it. Meeting Leila hadn't been part of any plan. I'd gone to that charity auction because a client was being honored and I wanted to support them. Leila was there because her mother had dragged her along to some society event she had no interest in. We'd both ended up at the bar at the same time, both trying to escape boring conversations with boring people. She made me laugh with her dead-on impression of her mother's social voice. I made her laugh by admitting I had no idea which fork to use for the salad course. We talked for 3 hours straight, and when she gave me her number, she warned me. Fair warning, my family's kind of intense about money and status and all that superficial stuff. If that's going to bother you, we should probably just call this a night. I'd smiled and said the truest thing I could without revealing the whole truth. Money doesn't define who someone is. Character does. 3 months later, I proposed. 6 months after that, we were married in a small ceremony that Beatrice had tried desperately to expand into a society wedding. Leela had shut that down, choosing instead a simple celebration with 50 people who actually mattered to us. Victor had given a toast that barely concealed his disappointment that his only daughter had married so far below her potential. I'd smiled through it, knowing that the man making jokes about my modest career was only able to pay for that wedding because of capital infusions from my investment fund. The game I was playing was dangerous, I knew that. Every month, Leela would stress about money in ways that weren't necessary. Our apartment was nice, but she'd grown up in a mansion. Our vacations were domestic because I couldn't exactly explain how we could afford European getaways on a data analyst's salary. She'd adapted better than I'd expected, never complaining, always insisting that being together was more important than the lifestyle her parents had provided. But I could see the strain it put on her, especially during family gatherings when Beatrice would make pointed comments about Leela's new normal. "Why do you let them treat you like this?" Leela asked me once after a particularly brutal Thanksgiving dinner where Victor had spent 20 minutes explaining to me how real estate development worked, as if I didn't already understand every aspect of his business better than he did. "Because your father's opinion of me doesn't define who I am," I'd told her. "And because I know something he doesn't. The most powerful people in any room are usually the ones nobody's paying attention to." If you've ever felt underestimated by people who thought they were better than you, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below about a time someone underestimated you and lived to regret it. And smash that like button because this story is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when Victor finds out who's really been running his company all along. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Chicago feel almost civilized. Leela spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on something that walked the line between respecting her parents' formality and not trying too hard. I wore khakis and a button-down shirt, the uniform of acceptable mediocrity that Victor expected from me. The Langford estate sat on 3 acres in Highland Park, a monument to wealth that always felt more like a museum than a home. The driveway curved through carefully maintained gardens before depositing visitors at a front entrance that belonged in a European castle. Leela's hand found mine as we approached the door. "Whatever they're planning," she said quietly, "just remember that I chose you. Nothing they say changes that." Beatrice answered the door herself, which was unusual. Normally, their housekeeper would handle such tasks. "Leela, darling," she said, embracing her daughter with the kind of careful affection that wouldn't disturb her makeup.
Julian. My name came out clipped, like she was acknowledging an unfortunate necessity. The dining room was set for 4, but the formality of the table suggested something more than a casual family dinner. Crystal glasses, china that probably cost more than my rent, and enough silverware to confuse anyone who hadn't grown up knowing which fork served which purpose. Victor was already seated at the head of the table, wearing a suit despite being in his own home. That was Victor, always performing, always reminding everyone of his status. "Julian," he said, standing to shake my hand with the firm grip of a man trying to establish dominance. "Good of you to join us." As if I'd been given a choice, as if this was his invitation to extend rather than a summons to answer. The first course arrived, and conversation stayed safely neutral. Beatrice asked Lila about her work at the nonprofit where she managed community programs. Victor mentioned a new development project in the West Loop. I played my role perfectly, asking just enough questions to seem engaged, but not so many that I might appear actually knowledgeable about the real estate market I secretly dominated. Then, as the main course was being cleared, Victor pulled out a leather folder. The kind lawyers use, the kind that meant business. "Julian," he began, his voice taking on the tone he probably used in boardrooms. Beatrice and I wanted to talk to you about something important, something that affects Lila's future. Lila's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. She'd seen this coming, even if she didn't know exactly what form it would take. We've been thinking a lot about Lila's well-being, Beatrice added, dabbing her lips with a napkin. She gave up so much when she married you, her lifestyle, her opportunities, her position in society. I felt Lila stiffened beside me. Mom, we've talked about this. Let us finish, sweetheart, Victor said, raising a hand. We're not here to criticize anyone, we're here to solve a problem. He opened the leather folder, revealing a stack of papers, and on top, a check. Even from across the table, I could see it was substantial. Julian, I'm going to be direct because I respect directness in business. You seem like a decent enough young man, but let's be honest about what happened here. You married above your station. That's not an insult, it's just a fact. Lila could have had anyone. She chose you, and we've tried to accept that decision. But, Beatrice continued, we can't stand by and watch our daughter struggle financially because of pride. So we've come up with a solution that benefits everyone. Victor slid the folder across the table. Inside was an annulment agreement, and clipped to the front was a check for $500,000. This is more money than you'd see in 10 years at your current job, Victor said. His voice carried the confidence of a man who'd never been told no by anyone he considered beneath him. Sign the annulment papers, take the money, and move on with your life. You'll be set up better than you were before you met Lila, and Lila can move on to a life more appropriate to her background. The silence that followed was absolute. Lila looked like she'd been slapped. Beatrice was studying her manicure, probably thinking this was already settled. Victor was smiling slightly, the smile of a man who'd just solved a problem with the elegant application of money. I looked at the check, $500,000. To Victor Langford, this was probably a rounding error. To the person he thought I was, it represented a lifetime of opportunity. And that was the beautiful irony of this moment. The man offering me $500,000 to leave his daughter was only able to make that offer because of the billions I'd pumped into his failing company over the past 8 years. That's a very generous offer, I said, finally, keeping my voice neutral. Victor's smile widened. I thought you'd see reason. Just so I understand correctly, I continued, pulling the check from the folder and holding it up to the light. You want me to sign away my marriage to Lila for $500,000? It's an annulment, Beatrice corrected. Much cleaner than a divorce. No fault, no ugliness, just a mutual recognition that the marriage was a mistake from the start. Lila stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is insane. You can't just buy people. Sweetheart, sit down, Victor said. The adults are talking. I'm 28 years old, Dad. I'm an adult, and my husband is sitting right here being offered money to leave me. How dare you? But Victor wasn't even looking at her. He was looking at me, confident that he'd already won. Julian understands how the world works. Don't you, Julian? Sometimes money is just the most honest way to solve a problem. I set the check down carefully, smoothing it flat against the tablecloth. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Before I respond, I said, I need to make a quick call. Would you excuse me for just one moment? Julian, what are you doing? Lila asked, confused. Making sure everyone at this table understands the full picture, I replied. I dialed my attorney, Elias Thorne, who I knew would be available despite the hour. Elias had been managing my interests for 8 years, and he knew exactly what to do when I called during family functions. Elias, it's Julian. I'm at dinner with the Langford family, and something interesting has come up. Could you pull the current ownership structure for Langford Realty Corporation? Yes, right now. I'll wait. Victor frowned. What does your attorney have to do with anything? Everything, I said simply. Then Elias was back on the line, and I switched the phone to speaker. Elias, could you please explain to everyone present the current ownership structure of Langford Realty Corporation? Elias's voice filled the dining room, professional and precise. Certainly,
Langford Realty Corporation has 100 million shares outstanding. The largest shareholder is JV Holdings, which owns 47 million shares, representing 47% of the company. The next largest shareholder is Victor Langford personally, with 18 million shares, or 18%. The remaining 35% is distributed among various institutional and individual investors. Victor was staring at the phone like it was speaking a foreign language. "What is this? What does any of this have to do with—" "Elias," I interrupted, "could you please explain who owns JV Holdings?" JV Holdings is wholly owned by Julian Voss. It was established 8 years ago using an inheritance and has been the primary investment vehicle for Mr. Voss's portfolio. The current value of the Langford Realty Corporation position is approximately $10.8 billion at today's closing price. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the silence of shock or awkwardness. This was the silence of a world being rebuilt from scratch. Leela's mouth had fallen open. Beatrice had gone completely white. Victor looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "I don't understand," Victor said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I picked up the check and held it out to him. "This is $500,000. You're offering me $500,000 to walk away from Leela." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Victor, I own 47% of your company. At current valuations, my position is worth $10.8 billion. Do you understand what that means?" "It means," Elias's voice came through the speaker, "that Mr. Voss is the single largest shareholder in Langford Realty Corporation. He has majority voting control when combined with other minority shareholders who defer to his judgment. In practical terms, Julian Voss could remove Victor Langford from his position as CEO with a simple majority vote at any board meeting." Victor's face had gone from white to red. "This is impossible. JV Holdings is— I thought it was—" He was stuttering, his carefully constructed authority crumbling in real time. "You thought it was an institutional investor," I finished for him. "Some faceless hedge fund or private equity firm. You never asked questions because the money kept coming when you needed it."
8 years ago, your company was drowning in debt. You couldn't secure financing from traditional sources because everyone knew you'd overextended yourself. So, when a mysterious investor started buying up your distressed shares and providing capital for your projects, you didn't look too closely at where it was coming from. I stood up, walking around the table until I was standing directly in front of Victor. Every major project you've completed in the past 8 years was financed with capital I provided. The River North Tower? My money. The Lakeshore Development? My money. The suburban office parks that saved your company during the 2015 downturn? All my money. Beatrice found her voice finally. "But you're a data analyst. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that terrible car." "I am a data analyst," I confirmed. "I analyze financial data for clients who need specialized investment advice. That's not a lie. It's just not the whole truth. The apartment is modest because Leela and I chose modest. The car runs perfectly well. I don't need to prove anything to anyone through displays of wealth." Leela was crying now, but not from sadness, from anger. "You've been watching us this whole time, watching them treat you like garbage, knowing you could destroy them with a phone call." "I could have," I agreed, "but I wanted to know who they really were. I wanted to see how far they'd go when they thought they had all the power." I looked at Victor, who was still frozen in his chair. "Turns out, pretty far." "Julian," Victor started, his voice shaking, "I didn't know. You have to understand. I didn't know who you were." "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "If I was actually who you thought I was, would this offer be any less insulting? Would trying to buy me away from your daughter be any more justified?" Beatrice was crying too now, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. "We were just trying to protect Leela." "Protect her?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were trying to control her. There's a difference." I pulled out my own phone and opened my email app. With a few taps, I sent a message that I'd had drafted for months, just waiting for the right moment.
I just sent an email to the board of directors of Langford Realty Corporation calling for an emergency meeting next Monday morning. The agenda is simple: a vote on the current CEO's position. Victor stood abruptly. You can't do this. The board will support me. They know what I've built. They know what we've built together, I corrected. And they also know that 47% of the voting shares support a change in leadership. I've already spoken with the other major shareholders. When we vote on Monday, you'll be removed as CEO. The board will install an interim executive team while we search for permanent replacement. But this is my company, Victor shouted. His composure was completely gone now, replaced by raw panic. I built this from nothing. No, I said quietly. You built it to the edge of bankruptcy. I saved it, and I did it while you were treating me like I wasn't worth the air I breathed at your dinner table. I turned to Leela, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth sooner. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times, but I needed to know if your family would ever accept me for who I am, not what I have. Tonight gave me that answer. Julian, she whispered, why? Why let them humiliate you when you could have just told them? Because humiliation is temporary. Character is permanent. Your parents showed me tonight who they really are. They offered me money to abandon the person I love most in the world. They valued their social status more than your happiness. I needed you to see that too. I picked up the check one last time and tore it cleanly in half. I don't want your money, Victor. I never did. I wanted to be part of a family. I wanted to prove that I could love your daughter without caring about her last name or her inheritance, but you couldn't see that. All you could see was someone you thought was beneath you. Elias spoke again from the phone. Julian, should I proceed with the board notifications? I looked at Victor, who had collapsed back into his chair, his face in his hands. I looked at Beatrice, who was clutching her pearls like they might save her from this nightmare. And I looked at Leela, my wife, who deserved better than parents who measured love in dollar signs. Yes, I said finally. Proceed with everything. It's time for new leadership. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Leela sat in the passenger seat of my terrible Honda, staring out the window at the city lights passing by. Finally, she spoke. How long have you been planning this? I wasn't planning anything, I said. Honestly, I bought into your father's company years before I met you. It was a good investment opportunity. Meeting you, falling in love with you, that was pure chance. Beautiful chance, but chance nonetheless. But you could have told me. You could have told me any time in the past 3 years. I could have, I agreed, but would you have believed that I married you for you and not for your family connections? Would you have believed that I loved you for who you are and not what you represented? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she admitted finally. Maybe not at first. I wanted you to know beyond any doubt that I chose you when I had nothing to gain from it. I wanted your family to reveal who they really were, and tonight they did. What happens now? She asked. To my father's company, to my parents. The company will be fine, I assured her. Better than fine. I'm going to install a professional management team that actually knows what they're doing. Your father will be offered a consulting position if he wants it, though with significantly reduced authority and compensation. And my parents? I sighed. That's up to you. They're your parents, Leela. I won't force you to choose between them and me, but I also won't pretend that what they did tonight was acceptable. She reached over and took my hand. I choose you. I've always chosen you, even when I thought you were just a data analyst with a Honda and modest dreams. Especially then, actually. Why especially then? Because that version of you loved me without any expectation of gain. That version of you chose me when you thought I was just a non-profit worker with a judgmental family. That's real, Julian. That's what matters. We pulled into our apartment complex, the modest building that had been our home for 3 years. Tomorrow, I could buy us a penthouse if we wanted. We could move to Highland Park ourselves, live in the kind of house that would make Victor and Beatrice's estate look quaint. But looking at Leela in the dim light of the parking lot, I realized we didn't need any of that. "We're keeping the apartment," I said suddenly. She smiled for the first time since dinner. Yeah, maybe we'll buy it instead of renting. But I like our life, Leela. I like being normal. I like proving that happiness doesn't require a mansion or a luxury car or impressing people who aren't worth impressing." "What about the money?" she asked. $10 billion is a lot to just ignore." "We're not ignoring it. We're going to do something meaningful with it. You're going to expand your nonprofit. We're going to fund community programs that actually help people. And maybe, if we're really feeling generous, we'll set up a scholarship fund for kids who want to go to business school but can't afford it." "Kids like you?" she asked softly. "Kids like I would have been if my grandfather hadn't left me that inheritance. Yeah." That Monday, the board meeting went exactly as I'd predicted. Victor was removed as CEO with a vote of 78% in favor. He sat at the end of the conference table, diminished and humiliated, while the board members who'd spent years flattering him now voted to strip him of his power. Beatrice called Leela 17 times that day. Leela let every call go to voicemail.
The next day, a letter arrived at our apartment via certified mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Beatrice. "Lila, I don't expect you to forgive us. What we did was unforgivable, but I need you to know that we thought we were protecting you. We thought Julian was using you. We were wrong. We were so terribly, horribly wrong. Your father is devastated, not about the company, though that hurts, about losing you. About discovering that the son-in-law he dismissed is the man who saved everything he built. Please, when you're ready, can we talk? I promise no more envelopes, no more checks, just a mother who wants to understand the man her daughter married." Lila read the letter twice, then set it on the counter. "Do you think they mean it?" "I think they're scared," I said. "And sometimes fear makes people honest in ways comfort never could. What would you do?" I thought about that for a moment. "I'd give them a chance, one chance, but on our terms, in our apartment, without the performance of wealth and status. If they can accept us as we are, actually as we are, then maybe there's hope. If they can't, then at least we'll know." Lila picked up her phone and typed out a response. "Dinner, our place, this Friday. No dress code, no expectations, just family." She showed me the message before sending it. "Too harsh?" "Perfect," I said. That Friday, Victor and Beatrice arrived at our apartment looking smaller somehow. Victor wore jeans and a sweater. Beatrice wore slacks and minimal makeup. They'd left their armor at home. "Julian," Victor said when I answered the door, "thank you for agreeing to see us." We sat around our small dining table eating pasta that Lila had made herself. There were no servers, no crystal glasses, no performance. Just 4 people trying to figure out if they could rebuild something broken. "I owe you an apology," Victor said finally. "Several apologies, actually. For every dinner where I made you feel small. For every comment about your job or your car or your background. For that check." He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. "For treating you like you were worth exactly $500,000 when you were the man who saved my company and loved my daughter." "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but the apology I really need to hear is the one you give Lila, because she's the one you tried to control. She's the one whose happiness you valued less than your social status." Victor turned to his daughter, tears forming in his eyes. "Lila, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't see what you saw in Julian. I'm sorry I made you feel like your choice wasn't good enough. You found a man who loves you for who you are, who didn't need your money or your name or anything except you. That's what every father should want for his daughter, and I almost destroyed it because of my pride." Beatrice reached across the table and took Lila's hand. I spent your whole life preparing you for a certain kind of life, a certain kind of marriage, and when you chose differently, I felt like you were rejecting everything I'd taught you. But you weren't rejecting anything. You were choosing something real over something hollow. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Lila was crying now, but she didn't pull her hand away. "Do you mean it? Because I can't go through another night like last Friday. I can't watch you treat Julian like he's not good enough when he's the best man I've ever known." "We mean it," Victor said firmly, "and we're prepared to prove it. Julian, I'd like to take you to lunch this week, just the two of us. I want to learn about your business philosophy, your investment strategy, everything I should have been asking about for the past 3 years instead of dismissing you." I looked at Lila, who nodded slightly. "Lunch sounds good," I said, "but Victor, I need you to understand something. I didn't buy into your company to control you or to hurt you. I did it because it was a good investment, and I'm not going to apologize for being good at something you didn't know I could do."
"I wouldn't expect you to," he replied. "I'm just hoping you'll teach me how you did it, because apparently I've been running a company without understanding who really kept it alive." 3 months later, Langford Realty Corporation announced a major restructuring. Victor remained on the board as a senior advisor, but day-to-day operations were handled by a professional team that had turned the company around completely. The stock price had climbed 40% since the management change. Lila's nonprofit had received a $50 million grant from the Voss Family Foundation, which I had established to do exactly what we'd talked about that night in the parking lot. We funded community programs, scholarships, and initiatives that helped people who were where I'd been 8 years ago. Talented, driven, but without the resources to prove it. Victor and Beatrice came to dinner at our apartment every other week. They'd learned to leave their expectations at the door and just be Lila's parents instead of Highland Park society figures. Victor had even started driving a more modest car, joking that if a billionaire could be happy in a Honda, he could probably downsize from his Mercedes. The story of the hidden billionaire made business news for a few weeks, but I refused most interview requests. What happened at that dinner table wasn't content for Forbes or the Wall Street Journal. It was personal. It was about family, about values, about what matters when you strip away the performance of wealth and status. One night, about 6 months after that fateful dinner, Lila and I were sitting on our apartment balcony watching the city lights. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "letting them humiliate you for so long when you could have just told the truth?" "Not once," I said honestly, "because now I know. I know your parents love you more than they love their pride. I know you chose me for me, and I know that I don't need anyone's permission to be exactly who I am." "Who are you?" she asked, smiling. "I'm Julian Voss. I'm a data analyst. I'm a billionaire investor. I'm your husband, and I'm the guy who proved that the most powerful people in any room are usually the ones nobody's paying attention to." She kissed me then, and the city lights sparkled below us like possibilities we hadn't even imagined yet. Somewhere across town, Victor Langford was probably working late, learning his company from the ground up, like the student he'd needed to be all along. Somewhere in their mansion, Beatrice was probably planning their next dinner at our place, making sure she didn't dress too formally. And here in our modest apartment that we'd chosen deliberately, Lila and I were rich in the only ways that mattered. We had each other. We had the truth, and we had a future built on something more solid than money could ever buy. Because at the end of the day, the envelope wasn't what changed everything. The check for $500,000 wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the moment when people showed you who they really were and what you chose to do with that information. I chose love. I chose honesty, and I chose to prove that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. Because when nobody's expecting you to win, victory tastes that much sweeter. My name is Julian Voss. I'm the anonymous investor who saved my father-in-law's company while he tried to pay me to leave his daughter. And this is the story of how I learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's living well. It's choosing integrity over retaliation. It's building something real while everyone else is busy building illusions. Victor Langford tried to buy me for $500,000. What he didn't know was that I'd already bought his respect. It just took him 3 years and one devastating dinner to realize it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated or dismissed by people who thought they were better than you, drop a comment below. Share your story. Let's celebrate everyone who proved that success isn't about where you start or who knows your name. It's about who you are when nobody's watching and what you do when everyone's counting you out. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the beautiful satisfaction of proving doubters wrong. And hit that like button if you believe that character matters more than bank accounts, that love matters more than status, and that the best victories are the ones nobody sees coming. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most dangerous person at any table is the one everyone's ignoring, because while they're busy underestimating you, you're busy becoming exactly who you need to be to change everything. Until next time, stay hungry, stay humble, and never let anyone make you feel small just because they can't see how big you really are.